What do people outside of the Christian faith seem to get wrong about what Christianity teaches when it comes to sexuality and relationships? What are some of the misconceptions that you find are really common?
Yeah, and in one sense, it's a tricky question to answer because sometimes the misconceptions have been, driven by Christians saying and doing
Yeah.
things that I think are unchristian. So one of the misconceptions might be that Christians hate gay people. Um, Christians shouldn't hate gay people, but
Yeah.
sadly, there are some Christians I think who do. Um, so in that sense, it's an understandable misconception. But I think probably the most significant one would be that the Christian teaching on sexual ethics is harmful,
Mm.
and especially harmful to young LGBTQ um, folks among us as well. So that's probably the single biggest objection. It's the most urgent one, and understandably so. That I've come across, and again, that was partly why I wanted to try to speak into this conversation as a Christian from within this sort of area of sexuality, because that's just not been my experience.
Yeah. Well, if we could
Now,
for
I
a
think
second,
there
like
are.
let's imagine, you're back to your 15, 16-year-old self as you're starting to experience these kinds of feelings and you're beginning to hear a little bit about God and the Christian story. And you're kind of wondering, how does God feel towards me, given my sexual feelings? What does that
Mm,
mean for me? So imagine someone your age is now watching this live stream and asking those sorts of questions, thinking, is the Christian story harmful? Does what God have to say, does that
yeah.
represent bad news for me and my sexuality? What message would you want to give? What are the things that you've really uncovered over your experience of diving into this question that have changed your mind on seeing Jesus really is offering good news?
Yeah, I think probably the starting point that is often most helpful is to say that what Jesus says about sexuality challenges every single human being. He doesn't actually single out gay people at any point in his teaching. He does have some really humbling and convicting, difficult things to say to every single one of us.
Mm.
So there's a sense in which Jesus says all of us are broken in this area of life. All of us have hearts that are disordered and confused and sort of misfiring and all kinds of things, that our passions are not straightforward and not always healthy, not always to be followed. And I'm not saying that to LGBTQ people. I'm saying that to every person.
To the human race. Yeah.
So yeah. So his teachings are that general and that sort of universal for us, and it's because all of us instinctively misunderstand and misuse human sexuality. Um, we make it about something that, broadly speaking, is there to satisfy us, whereas in the biblical vision for human sexuality is given as a means to serve others and ultimately to point in some unexpected and beautiful ways to the love of God shown us in Jesus. So I'd want 15-year-old Sam to know that whatever difficult things Christianity might have to say to him, they're difficult because Christianity is difficult for everyone. Jesus says to all of us that to be a disciple means to deny self and take up our cross and follow him. And that is difficult. We live in a
Mm.
culture that really esteems self-expression, um, and therefore self-denial intrinsically feels harmful.
Mm.
But so I'd want the teenage me to know that, ironically, paradoxically, and yet amazingly, it's as you come to know the Jesus who created you that you actually become the real you. We
Hmm.
we don't have access to the real us on ourselves. We can't figure that out. We try to. We grasp at things. We take certain intuitions and sort of make those the focus of our identity. But we can't truly figure that out unless we come to the one who had the idea of us in the first place.
Mm.
So I've really been thinking through that. When we think about God creating us, we don't just mean God happened to be the one who took the flat pack, kit and assembled us.
Hopefully
What
with
we're
less
saying is,
frustration than an IKEA
yeah,
thing.
yeah. No Allen keys necessary. Uh, what we're saying is, and this is what Jesus is saying, is that God thought us up in the first place,
Mm,
and therefore that nothing will be more life-giving ultimately than knowing the one who had the idea of you in the first place and thought
mm,
you up. So yeah, it will be difficult. It means saying no to any number of very, very cherished desires, which again is the case for everyone. And yet you find doing that actually to be life giving over time and
mm,
not life depleting.
mm,
Jesus also says if you try to save your life, you'll lose it. So if you try to grasp onto your agenda, your ideas of what will make life full and complete, you'll botch it up and make a mess of it. But if you lose your life for him, which means giving it over to him, you will gain it.
mm,
So it doesn't look easy, and sometimes for our precious LGBT friends, it looks unusually cruel to them. And partly that's because Christians have not done a very good job of explaining the good news to LGBT folks. And also it's because we've not been very good at articulating the cost of discipleship for everyone.
yeah.
So when we then see that cost of discipleship in sharp relief in particular instances, it suddenly seems cruel and unusual, whereas actually it's what Jesus demands of all of us.